Everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I am your host and lead beat writer, Tucker Sennett, joining you here today to discuss NC State's Friday night matchup against Florida State. Both teams enter this game with records of 5-5. NC State has that one less or one fewer loss in ACC play than Florida State. They've also played one fewer game than Florida State has in ACC play, because Florida State has that final matchup against Florida, which I will kind of talk about as a storyline in this game. But as we do every game week for NC State, a game day preview. This will come out before the game on Saturday. You can get all the info you need about this matchup right here on this game day preview. We're going to do what we always do: stat projections for NC State and FSU, a few key players, storylines that are going to play a major role in this game for the Wolfpack, a bold prediction for something that might happen in this game, a worst case scenario for NC State in this one, and of course, we'll wrap things up with a score prediction as we always do. So without further ado, let's dive in. We'll start with the stat projections. NC State coming into this game after that pretty horrific loss to Miami, 41-7. Uh, Easily their worst offensive performance of the season. Did only scored the one touchdown, obviously. Um, but it was really just dominant by that Miami defense overall. They that defense held Hollywood Smothers to negative yardage, which I'll get into a little bit later as well. But and CJ Bailey had kind of a nightmare outing with the two interceptions in that one. So this NC State team will need to find a way to bounce back offensively in this game. Starts with Bailey. I think Bailey will bounce back. I do. I think Florida State's pass defense, well, it can create some turnovers, and I do think he will turn the ball over in this game, even though he hasn't done that much at home. I do think he will because this team has some ball hawks, particularly Earl Little Jr. So I have Bailey passing for about 285 yards and two touchdowns in the game with an interception in this one. Smothers, I think, gets back on track. I think he rushes for closer to 90 yards in this game and gets in the end zone. The ACC's leading rusher kind of gets back on track with this game, but I don't think he's going to be alone in the rushing attack. I think Duke Scott has earned a larger share of the snaps, considering, at times against that more physical Miami defensive front, he was the more effective runner for a lot of the second half. Now, Miami did take out some of their key pieces down the stretch, which allowed him to have a little bit more success. But I do think, he can be a little bit more physical. He can run kind of in between the holes a little bit better, in between the tackles, and handle that contact pretty well. I think Noah Rogers, based on hearing him, he's really hungry to finish the season strong. I don't think he's super happy with the way that his season's gone. I could see him, trying to really make this one count and be a factor in the passing game. I have him with 50 yards and a touchdown receiving in this game. I really do think, this is an important one for him just to kind of build some confidence heading into next season if he's going to be a member of NC State. For the Florida State side, it kind of starts with quarterback Tommy Castellanos. This is, a veteran player that has played a lot of ACC football between Boston College and Florida State. Kind of came to Florida State as a risk of sorts, given how he exited in Boston College with Bill O'Brien. He's played. I don't think they can complain too much with his play in this 2025 season. I don't think you can blame the losses on him. Yes, he's a little bit limited in the passing game, but I do think, his ability as a rusher is going to be a major problem for this diminished NC State defense. So I have him throwing for about 190 yards and a passing touchdown, and then I have him finishing with about 90 yards on the ground as well and scoring there. at least once. I think he could score multiple times. I think the rushing attack for this team has been really effective. They've run for over 200 yards per game throughout their 5-5 start. When they're running the ball, they're really tough to beat, and they kind of do it by committee. They have Gavin Sawchuk, and then they have Singleton Jr., who can both make this happen. And Singleton has kind of taken that role over the last couple weeks as the primary back, but he's listed as questionable on the injury report for Florida State. So we'll see what his availability is going into this one. I do think they'll still find a way to do it by committee. They have other backs in the mix as well, and obviously Castellanos is a um, a weapon on the ground. So I think Florida State will still end up rushing for, 90 yards with the running backs in addition to whatever Castellanos throws up there. And I think they get some scores on the ground. The huge problem for NC State is going to be the star wide receiver, the USC transfer Deuce Robinson, who has been one of the most prolific wide receivers in the nation. He's a big, big target, much bigger than anything NC State can throw his way at the cornerback position. Expect them to, try to be a little bit creative in how they're going to stop him because I don't think they have much of an answer. So and he's on a serious heater right now. He's had over 100 receiving yards in his last 3 games. Um, he's really, really impressive to watch. Turning things on here late in the season. I think he goes for about 7 receptions, 100 plus yards, and a touchdown in this one. And that kind of leads into our first storyline, which is NC State's down some key players defensively. What's new? That's been kind of the story of the last 7 weeks for this team. But they're down a corner, which they have not had to deal with most of the year. Jamel Johnson, one of the regulars at the corner position, is not going to be available for this game. He's listed as out. He left the game against Miami. Um, well, he's not the number one corner. That's Devin Marshall. He's really important to this team just because his consistency. He very rarely got burned the way that Brian Nelson II has been getting burned of late. They brought Nelson in as kind of that ball hawk corner, and he's a little bit more of a gambler and has been getting burnt by some of the more elite competition to this point. I'm not totally sure who NC State can turn to in Johnson's absence, given, how battered this secondary is. I've talked at length about the safety positions. It could be an opportunity for Michael Tate to get some reps, but he's really not played all that much. So we'll see. They might have to move somebody over from nickel. Jackson Vick could be a candidate. This is going to be a really, really big test for this NC State defense to sort of replace Johnson by committee. And if anybody goes down in this game, they're going to be in really, really big trouble at that spot. So that's going to be a key storyline that I opened up with here. Moving back to the running attack for NC State, as I brought up, they didn't rush for more than 40 yards against Florida State. Might have even been under 30. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. But Florida State's not a great rush defense. They are stingy. I'm not going to say that they are as elite as Miami, but they've been solid against the run at times, and it's gotten them into trouble as a passing defense in moments, but they also are able to force a lot of turnovers. They have a player with 4 interceptions on the year, in Earl Little Jr. at the safety position, and they can make things happen. So NC State really needs to establish the run more effectively if it wants to have a chance in this game. And that starts with Smothers being able to return to form. He is the ACC's leading rusher for a reason. had those big games at the beginning of the season and has really tapered off. Obviously, missed that game against Georgia Tech, which was disappointing for him. Allowed Duke Scott to kind of have his breakout and really gain some confidence. And I think the duo of Scott and Smothers is going to be so crucial in this matchup. Unfortunately, moving into the next bullet point here, it's kind of unclear who's going to be blocking for them. Teague Anderson, the right tackle for NC State, left the game against Miami. Kamen Smith, who kind of pitched in relief for Anderson and then some other spots on the offensive line against Miami, has been listed as out. Anderson is questionable. If they don't have him, that's a huge veteran loss on the line. That makes the right side of the line pretty shaky. Spike Souls has been solid, but the true freshman, is also coming back from an injury. The Miami game was his first game back um, since missing the Georgia Tech game and leaving against Pittsburgh. So this group, already another undermanned group, is going to have to dig a little bit deeper and find a way to, fill in for Anderson if he can't go, or protect him if he's limited. And that's going to be somewhat problematic for Bailey, who's been a very, very different quarterback when he faces consistent pressure compared to when he has a little bit of time in the pocket. He was under siege big time against Miami and really, really struggled in that game, as I've said, when and tends to throw more interceptions when he's under pressure. That's when he starts to get the happy feet, which I've talked about before, and that can be problematic for him. A major thing that the Wolfpack has going for it is this team's been really good at home all season long. It's Military Appreciation Night, which is a big night for Dave Doran. Talked about that in the pot or in a story that came out on Friday. Feel free to go ahead and read that on the NC State on SI website. You can also find that on Twitter, the at Wolfpack on SI Twitter. Quick plug for you there. But this team's been really, really good at home. This team's 4-1 at the Carter Finley so far this season. The lone loss was that really bizarre game against Virginia Tech where, neither side of the ball could do what it needed to do in key moments, but they were in the game. And that's it. They've won every other game at home, had some escape, some high rise, tightrope walking wins like the one against Georgia Tech, or it's not the one against Georgia Tech. That was a pretty emphatic win. The one against Virginia and the one against Eastern Carolina, both were, tight games. They've had the blowout against Campbell. They've had the 12-point win over Georgia Tech. That was kind of their signature win on the season. This team is just different at home for whatever reason, and that's been the case for a lot of Dave Doran's teams over the years. He's been a much more successful coach at home. And the years where he has great success are the years where he can take a team on the road that's a little bit more mature and can handle those environments. This team isn't there yet. That's pretty evident, and he's been honest about that. But he is really good against Florida State. He's 3-0 in his last three, and two of those wins came at Carter Finley. So there's certainly some magic for NC State, and this is a little bit of a house of horrors for Florida State. So NC State will need to channel that. The last kind of major storyline is what this means for both of these teams. If NC State loses this game, it'll be 5-6 heading into the in-state rivalry game against, the perpetually dramatic North Carolina program under head coach Bill Belichick. They're kind of out of the hunt for a bowl game at this point, but they would love nothing more than to ruin NC State's chances of making a bowl and sort of they'd finish with the same record on the year. That would be a disaster for NC State. There's really no other way of putting it. Well, Florida State is in the exact same boat. This is a winnable game before it has to play a Florida team that, is has an interim head coach, but is going to have a lot of guys probably playing for sort of auditions for future schools, depending on what Florida ends up doing at head coach, who's coming back. It'll probably be a brand new team there next year. So Florida State would love to just get their bowl eligibility drama out of the way here and not take it to the buzzer, as would NC State. So that's going to be a big reason for both of these teams to play. And as Dave Doran said, two teams that are trying to resolve their seasons. Bold prediction time. Tommy Castellanos, FSU quarterback, will finish with 130 rushing yards in this game. NC State has been just not very good against mobile quarterbacks this season. Chandler Morris had a lot of success with Virginia, and that was when NC State's defense was healthy. Robbie Ashford of Wake actually was held in check for the most part on the ground, but had some success through the air, which was surprising. And then you had Haynes King, who is a much different quarterback than Tommy Castellanos and is a punishing runner. But the fact that they couldn't, he had over 100 yards rushing and threw for over 400 yards. So this NC State defense is leaking oil really badly down the stretch here. And Florida State is a team that has the playmakers to make you pay for that. And I think Castellanos will be that guy. It's going to come down to NC State being able to outlast Florida State in a shootout. My worst case scenario is this NC State team has sort of lost hope for anything. With all the injuries, with the horrific loss to Miami, it's hard to get a team that's at this point kind of not, I'm not going to say checked out, because the guys are still, practicing and clearly fighting for Dave Doran, but can you get them to go to war 2 more weeks and, keep that level of interest high for the guys that the seniors are going to play hard. That's a given. They only have so many opportunities left to A, play college football, B, put stuff on tape for the next level. And these next two games are really important because the most recent reps are often going to be the ones that teams look at first. And that's going to be critical for those guys. It's a question of, can you get these redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomore players who, are might have wandering eyes at this point, or are being forced into roles that they didn't expect. Can you get them to, push here and find a way to help those older guys get to a bowl game and finish strong? And there's a world where that just doesn't happen. And Florida State's a team that when you don't come to play, they can blow you out. They can throw points on the board. They score a lot. They've been really unlucky in one score games, but when they get out and front run a little bit, they've been really difficult to beat. That's a major thing with them. They have not been good on the road, but when they can get a lead, they're almost unbeatable because they just lean on that run game and it's impossible to come back. So I just worry that NC State falls behind early and Florida State leans on that run game and blows their doors off in Carter Finley Stadium, which would be a really disastrous outcome for NC State. It would be kind of a new low on the season, and the pressure would rise to a new high that this team hasn't felt all season long, and force them to rise to the occasion against a North Carolina team that's going to be trying to spoil the season. Score prediction: I think FSU finally gets over the hump in these one-score games and is able to beat NC State. I think they come into Carter Finley Stadium, they put points on the board early. I do think NC State will have some fight and get back, but I just don't think the defense is capable of getting the stops that it's going to need to in this game. So I have Florida State beating NC State 38-35 in Friday night's game. As always, really appreciate you guys tuning in for these episodes. Had some great viewership on last week's Miami breakdown. Hoping to continue that and keep putting these out there for you. As always, if you want more content, go ahead and hit up my social media feed at Senate Tucker on X. I've been posting some stories there. You can get caught up on NC State basketball as well. You can, of course, follow the website's X account at Wolfpack on SI and get daily episodes of the NC State Insider Podcast on the Sports Videos on SI YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you on the live thread tomorrow for the game. Later.